You might remember that in his late September social media post addressed to Attorney General Pam Bondi, President Trump demanded that justice be served against the following people he called, quote, guilty as hell: New York Attorney General Letitia James, California Senator Adam Schiff, and former FBI Director James Comey. Well, today, almost exactly 2 months later, Trump's Justice Department may have sunk the case that they concocted against Comey. Now, this case faced challenges from day one. Mainly, they could not find a prosecutor willing to bring charges. The previous U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, appointed by Trump, wouldn't do it. His office even wrote up a memo saying why they couldn't do it. They didn't find enough evidence to warrant charges. So he got the boot, and then a 36-year-old former insurance lawyer turned Trump defense attorney who had never prosecuted a case before was handpicked for the job. Now, at first, it seemed like she'd actually pulled something off, getting a grand jury to approve 2 of the 3 charges she sought against Comey. But as it turns out, a high-profile investigation might have been the wrong time to learn on the job. Today, Halligan was forced to admit that the full grand jury, and I quote here, never saw the version of the indictment that she signed and that was delivered to the judge. The courtroom, including the judge, was stunned into silence upon hearing the admission. Michael Dreeben, a lawyer for Comey, told the judge, quote, the charges should be thrown out as a violation of the First Amendment and due process rights, because Trump had used the Justice Department to punish and deter those who would speak out against him. This has to stop, he told the judge. This court is the first to confront the issue of whether a message needs to be sent to the executive branch. Senator Adam Schiff is a Democrat of California. He served as a federal prosecutor before joining Congress, and he joins me now. Senator, I want to ask you, in your capacity as a lawyer and a former prosecutor, there was a moment today when the live coverage of what was happening in the courtroom made its way out, where almost every lawyer I knew who had practiced in criminal court started going, what? I didn't know you could, what? What's going on? What was your reaction to what happened in that court today?
Well, it's astonishing that the indictment that was ultimately presented to a judge was never seen by the entire grand jury. So they bring one indictment in. It is 3 counts. The grand jury refuses to indict on one of those counts. They should have brought a new indictment before the grand jury and presented that. They didn't. And it still seems, and maybe part of the answer is this strange practice of bringing in an indictment that the grand jury hasn't seen. But there's also allegations of missing pages of a grand jury transcript. There's also allegations that this insurance lawyer turned prosecutor may have erroneously instructed the grand jury as to the law. Another really serious problem. You have the problem of her appointment itself, which may have been unlawful. And considering that she's the only one who signed that indictment, that could also get this case thrown out. And then you have, I think, what was really the gravamen of the hearing today, before it was acknowledged that the new indictment was never shown to the full grand jury. And that is the retribution here, the retaliation here. The evidence of that is so strong, where you have Trump telling Bondi, you've got to go forward with these prosecutions. You got the firing of a Republican U.S. attorney who wouldn't do it because there wasn't evidence. You've got firing of other top people. You have this personal lawyer thrown in. It is so plainly, palpably vindictive that I can't imagine facts more compelling than the ones we're seeing to have it thrown out on that basis alone.
Yeah, and to your point, it seems that the humiliating errors that have been made throughout the process here are not accidental or adjacent to the issue. They are the issue. The reason they're being made is because the professionals were fired so as to conduct a plainly pretextual prosecution.
That is exactly right. I think we're seeing the same problem at multiple layers in the Justice Department. So you force out the career professionals. You bring in this insurance lawyer. She goes alone into the grand jury or doesn't apparently have very good advice with her. And you have all these problems in the grand jury. So, you know, it's one thing when you have an enabler at the Justice Department. It's another when you have one who's not particularly competent. But then you have, you know, the kind of demonstration that you played earlier of Pam Bondi. the Attorney General saying we're opening this investigation of Democrats in the Epstein files because of new evidence. Is that right? Did I say new evidence? Do we have new evidence? It's whatever Todd Blanche said it was in his tweet. You know, this is the problem when people at the Justice Department at various layers view their responsibility not to the law, not to the rules of ethics, but to the president. And given that they've taken the position also that the president, under their unitary executive thinking, is also empowered to command prosecutions, they can't really claim, as they tried in court today, that, well, this prosecutor wasn't vindictive herself, and therefore it's not a vindictive prosecution when it was ordered by the vindictive commander-in-chief.
You just mentioned Pam Bondi's statements on the Epstein files earlier today. We just got word, I think it was posted on social media, the president has signed that law. He didn't do it in front of the cameras. He likes to do everything in front of the cameras, not this. We were just discussing the various ways and stratagems that might be employed to essentially subvert and sabotage the intent of the legislation. How confident are you that we're going to actually see what has been ordered by the law and promised?
I'm not at all confident. I think if past this prelude, what we can expect is more stonewalling, more cover-up, more inartful ways of explaining why they're covering up. I think when this chapter of history is written, it will be a test case in how not to handle a crisis. This has already been dragged out for almost a year. I think by drip, drip, drip of new documents they put out and more that they withhold, it will continue to only feed the appetite of the public to know the full truth. And the interesting irony here is that by announcing investigations into Democrats in the Epstein files and saying the president is not under investigation, well, presumably that means that any documents that mention the president can be released because he's not part of an investigation. It's only Democrats that were named by Epstein that would be withheld. So that's a strange irony they'll have to try to grapple with.
Point.
But I think we can fully expect that they will stonewall and they will, I think, incur the wrath of their base when they do. And the final point on this is to bring it back to what really should matter here, and that is the victims deserve this accountability. I think it is what drove such a strong bipartisan vote. They deserve to know the truth. They deserve to have these files released, whoever they implicate, and hopefully that day will come.
We started the block discussing a long post by the president where he had ordered Pam Bondi to investigate various individuals. That, by the way, I think is the Truth Social post that he just put up about signing it. As you can tell, it's, that's long, the sort of standard Trump stuff. He's naming various Democrats that he doesn't like and putting stuff in all caps, et cetera. He has directed people to be prosecuted by his Department of Justice, a clear violation, I think, of the First and 14th Amendment, as Michael Dreeben said in court today. You're among the three that were named. Two have been prosecuted. You're the third. Are you still anticipating that, that's going to get crossed off the to-do list at the Department of Justice?
Well, Chris, all I can tell you is what I read in the paper, and what I've read in the paper is that the career prosecutors, not unlike those in Virginia, have told Justice there's no there there. So whether that's the end of it or whether that's the beginning of a new, darker chapter where all those people get fired, there's simply no way of knowing. But I can say this, the enemies list has grown from those of us that were in the original three. You've got new investigations are opening in Florida of Clapper and Brennan and maybe Barack Obama and new villains named by the president every day. So the club I'm in is getting less and less exclusive. But I would also say it's important to put all of this in context. These political prosecutions are not different in kind than the administration efforts to silence critics at the universities, silence critics at law firms, silence critics in the media. It is part of a broad effort to intimidate and coerce people into silence. And I think we need to see it as that kind of systemic attack on our democratic society and our First Amendment.
Now that that law has been signed by the president and it becomes law, Your fellow senators passed this through unanimous consent. It was interesting to watch the way this happened. It wasn't, I think, what people thought would be what happened that day. Certainly Mike Johnson didn't think. There's two ways I can interpret this. Part of it, I think, is Senator Thune wants to just get it done and move on and do something else. So the question now becomes, do you think there's political will in the Senate to not just accept a Stonewall or another cover-up in terms of redacted pages or them missing the deadlines, et cetera?
Well, first of all, I have to say I was very amused to watch the clip you played of Speaker Johnson complaining that the Senate didn't take this up in committee and didn't spend the time it should have on this, when he kept the House out of session for 2 months to avoid any hearing, any action on this whatsoever.
They could have done it there.
So ironic that should, they could have done it there, absolutely. The short answer is no. I don't expect among Senate Republicans there's going to be any appetite to press the administration to be forthcoming in what's required under this bill. You may have a few lone voices. Senator John Kennedy has spoken out and urged the administration to essentially provide the files and stop dragging his feet. But I think we're going to have to fight to make sure that these disclosures are made and use the leverage we have to do that. And I think that we can count on a couple things. We can count on their stonewalling and the continuation of the cover-up. And we can also count on a lot of mistakes that they're making, and that the information ultimately will come out whether they wanted to or not.
Senator Adam Schiff of California, thank you.